Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a major intellectual showdown, a powerful critique of one of the most influential academic books of the 20th century. It's a clash of ideas that totally reshaped how we think about history, power, and the relationship between East and West.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the big idea at the center of it all. Back in 1978, a scholar named Edward Said published a book called Orientalism, and it was an absolute bombshell. He argued that for centuries, when Western scholars studied the Middle East, it wasn't some neutral, objective pursuit of knowledge. Nope. He said it was a system designed to dominate, to create a distorted picture of the Orient that justified Western control.
And this quote just nails it. Said's whole point was that the West literally invented this idea of the Orient. It wasn't about understanding the real places and people. It was about creating a fantasy land, exotic, mysterious, and most importantly, inferior and in need of being ruled.
Now, this idea was a total game changer in universities, but it also kicked up a massive, fierce debate that's still going on. So here's our roadmap. We're going to unpack one of the biggest, most comprehensive challenges to Said's entire theory, step by step. First things first, we really have to get our heads around the sheer impact of Said's book. This wasn't just some dusty academic text, it was a cultural event. I mean, just look at this number. It's been translated into 36 languages. That's huge. Its influence was staggering. It basically taught a whole generation of thinkers to see the history of Western scholarship not as a quest for knowledge, but as a tool for conquest. And that right there is the core idea that would eventually face a major takedown.
Right, so fast forward about 25 years after Orientalism first came out, a massive, book-length counterattack appears. It's from a scholar writing under the pen name Ibn Warraq, and his goal was pretty simple, to dismantle Said's argument brick by brick.
And this slide just lays out the central conflict perfectly, doesn't it? Warraq's book, Defending the West, isn't just a polite disagreement. Oh no. He argues that Said's entire theory isn't just wrong, but that it's intellectually dishonest and guilty of the very same kind of distortion it accuses others of. So you're probably asking, who is this guy, Ibn Warraq? Well, it's a pen name, one historically used by dissident scholars in the Islamic world. He's a former Muslim, and the event that really pushed him into the public square was the fatwa against the author Salman Rushdie. For him, that was a critical threat to free speech that had to be challenged. Okay, so let's get into the weeds of Warraq's critique. And what's so fascinating is where he starts. He doesn't go after the facts first. He goes after Said's methods, and he slaps a really provocative label on them.
Yeah, intellectual terrorism, that is a heavy charge. What Warraq is saying here is that Said doesn't win you over with logic or evidence. Instead, he claims Said just blasts his opponents with accusations of racism and imperialism from this untouchable moral high ground, basically silencing them instead of actually debating them.
And the knock-on effect of this, according to the critique, was huge. It allegedly created what Warraq calls an art of self-pity. Any internal problem in the Arab and Muslim world could just be deflected and blamed on the legacy of Western Orientalism. This, he argues, made honest self-criticism almost impossible.
Warraq also zeroes in on what he sees as a giant logical contradiction at the very heart of Said's book. I mean, think about it. Said says the Orient is a total Western fiction. It doesn't really exist. Okay, but then he also says Western scholars produced exact positive knowledge about it. Wait, what? And to top it off, he then faults those same scholars for failing to show us the true Orient. Warraq's point is, you just can't have it all three ways. It doesn't add up.
All right, so after attacking the methods, Warraq goes right for the history. And he is not gentle about it, calling out what he describes as a series of historical howlers. So check out this first one. Said claims that Britain and France were running the show in the Eastern Mediterranean way back in the late 1600s. The only problem? It's just flat out wrong. The Ottoman Empire was in control for another 100 years. For a book that's all about European imperialism, Warraq argues that's pretty fundamental. Next up, Dante's Inferno. Said accuses Dante of being deeply biased against Muslims. But Warraq says, hold on, let's actually read the text. Dante puts these incredible Muslim thinkers like Avicenna and Averroes not in the fiery pits, but in limbo, right alongside the greatest Greek philosophers like Plato and Socrates. Within the logic of the poem, Warraq says that's a massive sign of respect, not prejudice. And then there's Jane Austen. Said makes a connection between a character's estate in Antigua and Jane Austen herself, supporting the slave trade. Warraq's response? He calls this reading preposterous and scandalous. He's basically accusing Said of twisting the text and grasping at straws just to make it fit his argument. Now, to flip the script on Said's narrative of unique Western villainy, Warraq presents this timeline. His point is to ask a simple question. Why does the conversation about imperialism seem to focus only on the West? As you can see, Muslim imperial rule in parts of Europe lasted for centuries, way longer than Western colonial rule did in most of the Middle East.
And this is a really key point. Warraq isn't just poking holes in Said's theory. He's building his own positive case, a defense of the very Western civilization and scholarly traditions that Said put on trial. He talks about these 3 golden threads that he believes make the West what it is. You've got rationalism, a commitment to reason. You've got universalism, the idea that certain values apply to everyone. And then the big one for him, self-criticism. He says the West has a unique tradition of questioning itself. And ironically, Said's own book is a product of that very tradition.
He even uses the art market to make his point. On one hand, you have Said's view that these so-called Orientalist paintings are just tools of oppression. But then Warraq points to the real world, where these exact same paintings are selling for millions of dollars, often to wealthy collectors from the Middle East. For him, that's the ultimate proof that the art's beauty and humanity wins out over rigid political theory.
So all of this brings us to the bottom line. Why does any of this matter? It's an old academic debate, right? Well, the stakes are actually pretty high.
According to the source, the contrast couldn't be more stark. Warraq frames Said's legacy as one that closes minds. It fosters resentment, a politics of victimhood, and makes ignorance of other cultures feel like a moral high ground. He positions his own work as the exact opposite, an attempt to widen our sympathies, defend genuine learning, and celebrate our ability to understand each other.
And here is the final, incredible, ironic twist. The source concludes that maybe, just maybe, Said's biggest contribution to human freedom wasn't his own argument, but the fact that it provoked this powerful rebuttal from Ibn Warraq. The idea here is that real freedom thrives in the debate, in the clash of ideas, not in any single unchallenged theory.
And all of this leaves us with a really big question to chew on, one that goes way beyond this specific debate. In our search for justice, how do we criticize the wrongs of the past without distorting history to serve the needs of the present? Where is that line?